All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Emily Kile, and I am an attorney. We're in Scottsdale, Arizona, just in McCormick Ranch. My phone number is up there on the screen if you need to get a hold of us. And probably you got your announcement of the reminder of the Zoom from my office, so you should have our contact information, but you can always call and ask for anybody, and we'll do what we can to be helpful. Again, if you have questions, just type them into the Q&A or the chat at the bottom. I practice in the area of estate planning, guardianships and conservatorships, elder law, and special needs planning. So I'm here to help in those areas if you have questions or concerns. And I'm absolutely thrilled that Liz agreed to join me virtually today for her presentation. We have lots of use for pooled special needs trusts, and when I bring it up with clients, they always have never heard of such a thing before. So I think it's really important that people understand that there are some options out there when a special needs trust is required, that we have some really great options if maybe you're not the appropriate person to be the trustee, or you are going to be, you're going to age out. It's for your kid, and we need somebody or an organization that's still going to be around as your child continues to have needs into the future. So Liz is the Executive Director of Plan of Arizona, where she administers the special needs trusts, and she's helped families plan for the future for their loved ones with disabilities since 2012. She's a fifth-generation Arizonian, so she was here when it was all dirt, and an ASU grad. Growing up with a sister with a disability obviously gives her the ability to better understand the unique challenges families face when planning a future and getting a care plan in place. She serves on the executive committee for the National Plan Alliance Board of Directors and is dedicated to helping families by making sure they have the tools needed to put a future plan in place. And I can tell you that I know that Liz does her job not only in a fantastic way from a business sense and as a trustee, but her heart is 100% in the right place, trying to make sure that they always do the right thing and can help even when it seems that the trust is small and there are a lot of challenges. So she's definitely coming from a place in her heart to make this all work for you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Liz, and I'll keep my eye on the Q&A in the chat. And if you have any questions, please make sure to ask them so we can get those answered for you today. So thank you all so much. And Liz, thank you for being here, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Emily. I'm so happy to be here today and to be able to talk about pooled trust to all of you. So with that, I will begin. And please feel free to ask questions during the presentation because sometimes clarity is needed. So this is an introduction to pooled trust. So these are the kind of the pillars of the pooled trust. The pooled trust provides support for families. We offer security and peace of mind for the beneficiary and the families. We protect public benefits. We understand the laws that govern special needs trusts, and we provide safeguards to make sure the beneficiary can lead the best life possible, which is really our goal. So here's some of the things that we're going to go over during this presentation. What is a pooled trust? What are the benefits of a pooled trust? What can a pooled trust provide? What are the components of a successful pooled trust? Pooled trusts are national, part of our National Plan Alliance. I think we have 33 different pooled trusts in a variety of states. Some states have several pooled trusts. Arizona only has one that is state specific, but there's some national ones. And the steps to leading to a pooled trust. So pooled trust is a trust consisting of several separate sub-accounts, each for a specific beneficiary. So it's much like a bank. The money is all pooled together for investment purposes, but the only part you really see is what your piece of the pie is. So the contributions and disbursement are tracked separately for each sub-account, just like a bank does. They do the same thing. Assets for the pooled trust, or assets are pooled for investment and administrative purposes. One of the nice things about that is that it helps keep the costs low. So the investment manager charges a fee, but they charge it for the whole pool. And within the pool, there's different asset allocations. So then each participant in the pool only pays for their share of the cost. So it really helps to keep fees to a minimum. There's two types of pooled trusts that are administered. There's the pooled or D4C trusts, which are self-settled, and that means that it's the beneficiary's own money. And then there's also pooled third-party trusts, and those are basically when a third party is funding the trust. So it could be, typically it's parents, but it could be friends or family that can also put money in it, but the beneficiary can never put their own money into a pooled trust. Into a third-party pooled trust. So we're going to talk about the D4C or self-settled trust first. So the self-settled trust must be administered and established by a nonprofit organization. So banks, other types of fiduciaries cannot run a pooled trust. You must be a nonprofit organization, which is, I think, one of the big separators on what we do versus what a bank or other fiduciary is able to provide. An individual trust beneficiary may establish the subtrust account on his own, or it can be established by the individual's parent, grandparent, legal guardian, or a court.
And Liz, can the competent beneficiary also sign that joinder agreement? Is that
yes?
acceptable?
So as long as they're competent, then they can sign on their own. They can create the joinder agreement, and we have quite a few people that do that, and that's always the easiest way to do it. Let's see. Pooled trusts do not have an age requirement to join, but some states such as Arizona impose a penalty after age 65. And Emily, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because we've not done any over 65, but there's a 2-year look back. So basically, my understanding is that it's 2 years that you can't use the funds once you put it into the trust. And is there any more to that? Is it just the 2-year period, Emily?
So my understanding is actually the amount of money that goes into the trust is treated there's a transfer penalty, just as there would be for any other ALTCS transfer. So for approximately every $7,500 that would go into the trust post age 65 would be 1 month that the person is not eligible anymore for their DDD or ALTCS benefits. So it just depends on how much goes in. And I want to make sure also that the attendees understand that saying there's a penalty post age 65 is only for new money coming in. It doesn't have anything to do with the trust was established when the beneficiary was 40 and they're 70 and the trustee is continuing to make distributions. It's just about new money coming in. You can't fund it after age 65 without losing benefits for some period of time, depending on how much money went into the trust.
That's a much better explanation. So unlike D4A trust, and what a D4A trust is, it's an individual trust that Emily would draft, and then perhaps Plan of Arizona or another pool trust organization would become the successor trustee of it. So unlike the individual trust, a pool trust can retain the remaining assets or reimburse the state for medical benefits provided over the beneficiary's lifetime. So basically, Medicaid has kind of a lien, so to speak, against the money. So typically, any money left over in the pool trust would first go back to pay back Medicaid, and then could go back to pay back, have a remainder beneficiary. Say there's $1 million and Medicaid was $500,000, and there might be money left over for whoever the remainder beneficiaries to have some funds left. But typically pool trusts are smaller, and the Medicaid lien oftentimes is larger than that's left in the trust. So in a lot of states, the pool trust will retain those funds, and those funds are put into a charitable account where different beneficiaries or different people with special needs can apply for small grants. So I know there's some large pooled trust organization on a national level that have, several $1 million in their charitable remainder fund. And people can apply for things like maybe they need dental work or maybe they need a new wheelchair. So it's kind of the pooled trust. Yes, we might retain those funds, but we're also going to give back to the community. So it's kind of part of the nonprofit's charitable purpose. So some of the examples of a self-settled trust, say a grandparent leaves $10,000 to their loved one with a disability, not really realizing that they're on public benefits, or maybe they drafted the trust years ago and never changed it. So now this money is a countable resource. So the participant, instead of spending it down, they might want to roll the money into the pooled trust so that they can have that money for, things over several years. Some other examples are someone gets into a car accident, they get a $100,000 settlement, and it makes sense to roll that into the pooled trust because it's already established instead of, drafting a separate trust. Or maybe it's, $30,000. So then it just doesn't make sense to draft a separate trust. Or maybe a payback from SSI, or maybe you got really lucky at the casino and won $20,000. So those are just a variety of ways. And Emily, what are some other ways that might be more unusual for someone to put money into these are the typical ways that we see.
Yeah, I think these are the same for us. These are the kind of the typical things that happen as to how funds would get into would be considered that they have to go to a self-settled trust because they are the beneficiary's money. And so the other thing that we see sometimes, as you said, is we've had some beneficiaries who, they do the scratch-off lottery tickets, and maybe they've already funded their ABLE account, and so we have to find a place where those funds are going to go. We've also had situations where parents forgot that either they or the grandparent did some savings bonds when the child was born. And now we have some money, a couple $1,000s, and again, maybe an ABLE account isn't going to work for some reason, and the pooled trust is the best place, or some goes to the ABLE account and some goes into the pooled trust. I think one of the things that I often, the question that comes up a lot in our office is, whenever I talk about that an inheritance left to the disabled beneficiary has to go into a self-settled special needs trust, whether it's a pooled trust or otherwise, is to remember that for those of you who have done a good job with your estate planning, your estate plan says that the share for that disabled beneficiary goes to the third-party special needs trust that your attorney drafted or our office drafted, whether as a separate trust or part of your trust or as part of your will. We're talking here about literally the person says, Joe Smith, who happens to be an SSI beneficiary or somebody getting ALTCS or DDD services, they leave 10% of their estate directly to that beneficiary. That's when we have this issue, and a pooled trust is a really nice solution for that.
Thank you. So third-party pooled trusts are the other type of pooled trust that pooled trust organizations administer. And the difference between the first and the third, again, is that it's established by a third party, so it's never the beneficiary's money. Typically, it's parents that establish the third-party trust, but it could be friends. We've had generous friends that have done it, grandparents, siblings that want to do it, but it's someone other than the beneficiary. The beneficiary can't have any ownership interest in the funds that go into it. The trust could be revocable or irrevocable. Typically, it's only revocable maybe if the parents want to fund the trust with $5,000 and for the organization to provide services, and then it becomes irrevocable upon the death of the grantor. We don't see it very often, but sometimes some families want to do that. It does not require a payback under most circumstances. We've never had a payback, so I don't know under what circumstances there would be a payback. That's probably a question for Emily. And then when the beneficiary passes away, and this is another really big difference between the third-party trust and the self-settled trust, is that in our joinder agreement and in all joinder agreements for pooled trust, there's a remainder beneficiary gets to be named. So the grantor, the family member that is establishing the trust says, you know, after my son passes away, it's going to go to his sister. So typically, sometimes families decide to leave a little bit more to the disabled beneficiary with the idea that the remainder funds will go, you know, to the other siblings who aren't disabled, who maybe have jobs. And it's different for every family, but that's kind of what we see. And so that's a really nice thing for families to be able to name that remainder beneficiary.
Yeah, I would say the only situation in which a third-party trust would require a payback to the Medicaid agency is if it was not written properly, because the whole idea is first-party trusts are the beneficiary's money. So the public policy idea is we're going to let you use this money during your lifetime for these specific things and still provide benefits. But when you're gone, you're going to have to pay us back, kind of like a loan. A third-party trust, the public policy is, well, mom and dad didn't actually ever have to leave money to the beneficiary. And so you can keep that segregated and use it for the benefit of the beneficiary, and they can still get benefits. But we, the Medicaid agency, won't ask for the money back, because otherwise parents and grandparents would just disinherit disabled children. So that's kind of the public policy reason.
Thank you. So one of the other examples, well, we kind of went over this. I mean, parents and family members are typically the ones that do it. But one other thing that's nice for in third-party trust is once the trust is established, anybody can leave money to it except for the beneficiary. So sometimes we'll have parents establish the third-party trust, and then maybe an aunt and uncle want to leave money to that disabled beneficiary. And instead of leaving money directly to the beneficiary, then having to create the self-settled trust, you know, parents will say, hey, if you want to leave money to Joe, you know, please leave it into his special needs trust that is established. So sometimes we send out letters to family members saying, hey, this trust is established. If you're going to leave, you know, money to this disabled person, please leave it into this trust, and here's the wording on it. So that's kind of one of the other nice things. I know I have a sister with disabilities, and you know, the trust is established, and you know, aunts and uncles, it might not be a lot of money, but everyone's leaving a little something, and it's really nice because that will benefit her. So some of the other things that are really important to know about pooled trust is they're managed by professionals that are familiar with federal and state laws and regulations versus, you know, a sibling or a friend of the families that might not know anything about the laws. You know, puts a lot of pressure on the trustee when they're named, when they don't know anything about Social Security. They don't know what can and cannot be paid for. You know, they could say, oh, I'm going to give Susie, you know, $500 and not realize that they need to have receipts for all of those, not realize that it can't be used for food, housing, or utilities, you know, or then there's a reduction of their benefits. So there's just so much that goes into administering special needs trusts, and it's not always a good fit to have a family member do it. The pooled trust is easy to join. So we have a master trust document that is already that was established by an attorney here in town, and all organizations nationally, this is what they do. There's a master trust agreement that's established. Most of them send it off to Social Security to get approved and to access for approval. And then there's what's called a joinder agreement, which is 4 pages long. It's very simple, and you join the master trust. So that's you're joining the pooled trust as opposed to having an individual trust that Emily or another attorney would draft. Let's see, so one of the other benefits of pooled trust organizations is they also provide assistance to beneficiaries and representatives in reporting to government agencies. So most pooled trust organizations provide a whole slew of what we call wraparound services. So we do all of the reporting to access and to Social Security when the trust is established. We do all the budgets that are required. We help them with any paperwork if they are getting, if they get a notice that they have to come in and reapply, we help with all of that. We had a beneficiary once that was going in for like her review, and she says, yeah, I have a trust, and there's a lot of money in it. And so we get a letter from Social Security saying, well, this is going to disqualify her. And we're like, no, it's a special needs trust. So those are just things that we're able to provide because, again, we kind of know what the laws are surrounding this.
And I think, Liz, that's an excellent point, though, because I think a lot of people, whether it's a trust that your attorney drafted, we drafted it, or it's a pooled trust, that you need to understand that the beneficiary has an obligation to report the trust and all of the funding to any agencies that are providing services that are based on income and or assets. So you don't have to report the trust until there's money in it, but once there's money in it, it does have to be reported. So we certainly believe that the work that we do, as the other attorneys in town do, that the trust they draft will not be a counted resource for those DDD, ALTCS benefits, and SSI. But because the government is providing the services, you have to let them know, hey, I have a trust document. This is the source of the money, and here's a copy of the bank statement or investment statement showing what's in the trust. And I think that that's a step that oftentimes gets missed when you do have an individual trustee. So having a professional who understands what has to be reported and making sure that it goes to the agency in an appropriate manner. And any of you who have a first party special needs trust, pooled or otherwise, filling out that annual anticipated disbursements form is really fun. So having a professional by your side to make sure that it's being done correctly and that, all of the paperwork goes in, I think is a huge help. That's a huge issue, I believe.
And just being there for the beneficiary, if somehow they say, oh, this is a countable resource, to be able to know where to go, what resources available, who we need to call to fix the problem and to appeal it, because it does happen. Especially with the beneficiaries who are like, yeah, I have lots of money in a trust. Okay, so the next slide. So again, going back to kind of the benefits of a pooled trust organization, we have staff, and this applies to all pooled trusts, that are knowledgeable about how to manage the trust. Again, what are the rules and regulations? What can we pay for? What aren't we supposed to pay for? What happens if we do pay for it? What are the consequences, and being able to weigh what is best for the beneficiary long term.
So we have a question that I think is, there have been other questions that I've been able to field for you, but this question is, well, what happens if somebody is in a pooled trust that was established in a different state and then they move to Arizona? Do they need to move the money from the pooled trust in that other state to a local pooled trust? Can they leave it there? Can they move it from one pool to another pool?
Yeah,
how does that work?
Yes, you can port a trust, and typically we have to go to court to do it. It just depends on how the master trust document is written. We've actually ported a trust out. We went to court and we sent it to another organization because it was better served for the individual in another state. We've had third-party trusts that we've been able to administer remotely, but typically, especially if there's wraparound services available in a state, it's better to port it out. We're getting ready to receive a trust from another state as well, and it's state specific. It depends on how the master trust document is read. It depends on if it's first party or third party, because first party gets a little more complicated with the Medicaid payback. But yes, it can be done, and it's especially for third party, it's a very simple process. A little more complicated for first party. But we also go back and forth. So right now we have one of our sister organizations in Colorado, the Colorado Fund for People with Disabilities. They have a beneficiary here in Arizona and asked us to provide the wraparound services. So they're keeping the trust there, but they're going to partner with us to provide services. So one of our social workers is going out and working with the beneficiary. So again, we're a closed group on a national level, and we all kind of support each other. So if we're able to keep it in the state, we have lots of organizations that we can partner with for more specific services. And that's one of the other really great advantages about a pooled trust. Did that answer the question? Okay.
They didn't write back to say it did not, so I will say that it did. But I think it's also a really important point that if your person is in a pooled trust, you can't go from a pooled trust outside of a pooled trust. So then I can't draft a trust for you and you name somebody individual as the trustee and move the money from the pool to the D4A trust, as we call them. I have no idea why the government decided that there was that restriction. But it is important to understand that kind of, if you're going to do a trust with an individual trustee, then that's the way you're going to go. If you're going to do a trust with a pooled trustee, again, you can switch which pool you have, but you're going to stay in the pooled trust arena.
Exactly. So one of the other advantages is it provides continuity. It does not depend on one individual. And I think this is really important because I've been meeting a lot with families lately, and they, are like, wow, we created this trust 10 years ago and we were going to have my sister do it, but now she's, 70 and she's got health issues and we don't know what's going to happen. And that's, I think, one of the issues with having an individual be the trustee versus an organization like ours, or even a corporate trustee like a bank, is that if that person dies and say the remainder, say you've named a trustee and a successor trustee and both of them can't serve, well, then you don't really know who's going to serve after that unless you have a whole slew of, remainder. Typically people have a couple. But if you go with an organization that's a pooled trust, it doesn't matter if the executive director, leaves or there's some staff changes, that you're going to be with that organization. The organization isn't going to change. Most of these pooled trust organizations have been around for a really long time. They have millions of dollars in trust assets. That they're going to be there and that there's a focal point. So the beneficiary is not being, oh, well, now it's this person and then they have to get used to that person. And now it's this person and maybe that person doesn't know what they're doing. It's an organization where they get to know the staff. In our organizations, we've had no turnover since I've been there. Very little turnover ever. And so we have a team and our beneficiaries know who we are. They know they can depend on us. It's not a revolving door. And so I think that's just it gives a lot of security and peace of mind to the beneficiary to know, okay, this is Plan of Arizona. This is who's going to be working with me. We get to know them, or again, this is for all pooled trusts. We're going to get to know them. They know who we are. We know who they are. We know what their needs are. And most of the times, especially if it's third party, we've met with the families. We know who they are, and they know, and the families know. We have peace of mind now because Plan of Arizona or whoever is going to take care of this. So that's a really, I think that's one of the biggest things that I get out, especially from the parents, is them just knowing that an organization, it's not a person, it's an organization that's going to be there.
So a question for you, Liz. Is there a way through the paperwork to list a family member or somebody else who would get accountings to make sure that the funds are being used appropriately? Like, how does somebody kind of oversee what's going on?
Yeah, so we work a lot with families, and we have a portal on our sub-trust accounting platform. So for those of you who might be familiar with TrueLink Financial, they kind of cater to our industry. They are our sub-trust accounting platform and our investment manager for our trust. So they have an online portal, and we can also send paper statements. The quarterly statements go out, so they can either be mailed or they can, go online at any time to see what money is going in and out. And so the beneficiary, and then typically a parent will name kind of I'm drawing a blank on the term, trust protector, so to speak, who will also get that paperwork. So, because if the beneficiary is really competent, maybe there's not a need for that. But if they're not, then we always want another party involved, whether it's for emergencies, to get the bank statements, to make sure that someone is viewing that. So we always either, whether it's in a letter of intent from families, or they put it on the joinder agreement, who they want that person to be that will get those statements. And that's really important, and that's a good question.
Yeah, and you just talked about the competent beneficiary, and I think that's another great point, which is that when you have a disabled but competent beneficiary, there isn't a family member between that person and their money. They can contact the pooled trustee and say, I need a new bed, or I want to go on vacation. Can you put money on a TrueLink card for me? So that they can have some sense of independence and sort of reduce any tension that might otherwise exist within the family.
Yeah, and Emily, that's such a good point. I mean, like I mentioned before, I have a sister with disabilities, and I would never want to be her trustee. It's somewhere else. It's not part of us, because she would hate me. Like, we would fight all the time. And now I'm separated from that, and I just get to be your sister, right? We can go to movies, we can hang out, we have fun together. There's not that, well, you said I couldn't have this. You said no to this, and it's not your business. It's my, you can hear the whole thing, right? And so having that third party that is not related to the beneficiary, and we welcome family being involved. We have siblings that are very involved that we talk to all the time. They want to know what's going on. We work through them. If maybe a beneficiary has a request that we're not sure about, we can call the family and say, what do you think of this? Do you think this is justified? And they'll say, oh no, I bought them, that laptop last year, and they should still have it, so you don't need to do that, or whatever it is. So we work really well with families, and we all kind of have our space, but we are the trust administrator. And families also do set up these trusts while they're living, the third party trust, because sometimes they want a buffer. Maybe they're supporting the individual with a disability and they're just tired. Maybe it's someone with mental illness and they don't want to be that middle person anymore. So they will partially fund a trust with us, the pooled trust. And then we become the focal point for the financial stuff. And then the parents get to just be the parent, right? It's, hey, you want that? Call Plan of Arizona. I'm not in charge of giving you money anymore. And that's another thing that we do a lot of. And it's, and then of course, once the parents pass away, we already have a relationship with the beneficiary. So there's no, oh God, who is that organization? I don't know anybody there. I've never heard of them. We've been able to practice with the beneficiary. We've worked with the family. We know what we need to do for this beneficiary. We have the parents there to kind of call on and say, hey, what do you think about this? But it just, again, provides that continuity, and it's another option. So our trust documents, like I said, is, they were drafted by attorneys that practice in this field, and they were all approved by Medicaid and Social Security, so for compliance. And that's really important because laws and rules change, and we have a little time frame. If something changes, we can make those changes and resubmit it to them. But at this point, everything's been approved. So, and one of the other nice things is we take smaller initial fundings, and all pooled, well, not all, most pooled trusts do this. So maybe it's a $5,000 inheritance or a, back payment. Well, a bank isn't going to want to be a trustee of that. So if you're not going to use a family member, not a lot of organizations are going to take a $5,000 trust, but because we're a charitable organization, our part of our mission are to take those smaller amounts. And again, this is on a national level, because that $5,000 could make a huge difference in that person's life. Maybe they're saving for a new wheelchair or something, and down the road, they're going to need that $5,000 and they don't want to just spend it down, So that's another really big thing that sets a pooled trust apart from a corporate fiduciary like a bank. Is most banks, I think, 500,000. There might be a few banks that do smaller amounts, but they don't really want to take small trusts. So we also assist individuals and families in creating long-term plans that are documented and funded. And this is another really big, important aspect is, we really sit down with families and we want to understand what are the long-term needs of this beneficiary? What are they going to need now? And what are they going to need in 5 years, 10 years? What does it look like? So we're not only just administering the trusts, we are looking long-term to make sure that the beneficiary can lead the best life possible. And this is on a national level. And all of our organizations, this is what we look to do. We all create these long-term care plans. We talk to the families. We have them create letter of intents, which is a letter saying, here's what I want my son, in the ideal world, my son or daughter, this is what I'd like their life to look like. I would like you to send birthday cards. This is really important to them. They go to church every Sunday. You need to arrange this. And we have beneficiaries that every Sunday we Uber them to, they can't drive and the bus is too far and they had a favorite church they've gone to forever. And we Uber them to church. And that's like a really important thing. And the family says, this is what we want you to do. So creating that long-term care plan is really important. And you're really not going to get that with a corporate fiduciary like a bank. That's not really what they do. They strictly administer trusts. And again, with family members, that the family member that's the trustee passes away and no one else can serve, then who's going to be there to make sure that your dreams and goals for the person or that person's dreams and goals, I'm talking a lot kind of about third party stuff, is fulfilled. I mean, it's important. We provide coordination for support, long-term care plans, and more individual choices. So most of the pooled trust organizations provide all sorts of wraparound services. So we take people, we have social workers that go, and again, I'm speaking kind of on a national level for state-specific organizations, more than the big national companies, because they don't always provide the wraparound services. But for the state-specific ones, they do. We have beneficiaries we take to the doctor. We make sure they go to the dentist if they need dental work. Sometimes we have staff that go with them. Sometimes we can Uber them there and talk remotely to the dentist. So we're not just administering the trust. We're making sure that all of the beneficiaries' needs are met, whether it's doing well checks. We just bought someone a car. We just bought someone a mobile home. We do everything. We literally become a proxy parent. So we're there to do as much or as little as needed. Some of our beneficiaries, they call us when they need something, and some they need weekly check-ins. So it just varies. We protect the funding for services that individuals and family members would like to have throughout the future. We really take a look at how much, if there's $10,000 in the trust, well, we may not use that for regular disbursement. So we really take a look at what's in the trust, what's available out in the public, what free services can we get? Maybe it's some free or discounted dental work. So we're always looking at, okay, there's $10,000 in this trust. We need it to last 20 years. So we're only going to use it for emergencies. Or there's $1 million in the trust. We can provide, this, and this. It just depends on the thing, but we're always looking to the future to make sure that we are being responsible in how we are administering the trust. We're not just going to take the $10,000 and be like, oh, yes, we're going to give you $1,000 a month for clothes. And then, a year it's gone, right? We're going to be like, hey, you're 25 and it's $10,000. We're going to use this for emergencies. So it just depends. Every trust is different, but we really take our duty to protect those assets seriously. And it's, our charitable mission. So one of the other, and I kind of already went over this, is, oops, sorry, I'm like, watch your cursor. Pooling for funds for investment and management. Again, we have, in our pooled trust, we have different asset allocations within the pool. So maybe someone that has 800,000 we're going to want to invest that money a little differently than we're going to invest, the one that has 5,000 in it. And it depends, we take a look at what is going in and out of the trust on a quarterly basis. So we always keep, a quarter of disbursements in cash for liquidity. But we get together with TrueLink, our investment team. Every time a new trust comes in, we put together a budget and we're like, this is the long-term goal. And then they help us decide which asset allocation to put it in. And surprisingly, the stock market's been crazy, but our pooled trusts have been doing, I wouldn't say amazing, but they've done really well. And so we even had someone call us and thought that they were doing too well. So that might change by the end of the year or this quarter, but we're like, really? Okay. So
we have a question.
Sure.
that is whether you can assist somebody who's not verbal and there are no relatives or friends really left once there's just nobody around. It seems to me like that's kind of the perfect fit for the pooled special needs trust, because you can provide all those support services, and visit with the person wherever they might be and talk to their caregivers and make sure they have appropriate housing.
Yeah.
And so is that
Yes.
correct? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, yes. And we do have some nonverbal beneficiaries. Some of them have guardians, and so we work with the guardians. But if they don't and they have care managers that, wherever they are, that's definitely something we can do. And we work a lot with, like, some of our beneficiaries are in assisted living. So we're always, working with their whole team. It's this assisted living, maybe it's DDD services, whoever their case manager is. And we kind of become a team to make sure that we're meeting all of the needs. So maybe the DDD person goes out, the case manager goes out and says, gosh, you need a new belt, right? So maybe they call us and say, hey, so-and-so needs a new belt. I noticed his pants are, so we really work together as a team with all of the providers. So it's definitely something we can do.
And then another question is, what's the time frame? So if a request for distribution is made for whatever, for clothing, money to go on a vacation, buying a vehicle, how long does it take from the time the request for the distribution is made until the funds are available?
It can be made
for the
same day in emergencies, depending on the amount. But, excuse me, typically it's overnight. So say a beneficiary, if they submit it in the morning, it's, timely. I mean, if it's at 4 o'clock, it's not going to go in the next day. It'll probably be the day after. But if they submit us, hey, I really need $300 for clothing, and they have a TrueLink card. So we have these, it's a great tool, these TrueLink cards, and they're basically prepaid Visa cards where we can go in and say how they can use the card. So maybe she says, well, I'm going to go to Kohl's and I want $300 for clothing. We can load the money on the card. Typically it'll be there the next day. She can go to Kohl's, because maybe we block everything else off. And sometimes, typically we don't if they're responsible. We have some beneficiaries that we can't trust. So we say, you want to go to Kohl's? Kohl's is the only place you can go. And then they send us the receipts, and we send self-addressed stamped envelopes to the beneficiary. And again, this is for our beneficiaries that are able to do this. We do it other ways if they can't, but it can be next day. We try to do everything next day. And if there's an emergency, gosh, my car broke down, we can do it same day, as long as we find out by like 3 o'clock. So there's a lot of different ways we can, we have social workers that can go out and make payments also. So there's just different ways we can do things. So pooling of the trust fund management, a plan for preserving and using resources. I kind of touched on that when I talked about the budgeting, which is really important, and I need to stop moving my cursor. But that's just really important. Having an organization, whether it's a bank or whoever, that is really looking at the long-term plan. And we've had banks send us over trusts where they literally spent down the money. There's no money in the trust, and the beneficiary was eligible for ALTCS and would have been eligible for ALTCS, 7 years ago. And so they weren't looking at preserving those resources. They're like, okay, we're just going to make distributions, even though the person's been in assisted living. So they're not looking at the whole picture. So, the pooled trust organizations really take that part seriously, as in preserving resources. I mean, that's so important, because we all want the money to last as long as possible. Does the beneficiary no good if he's 25 and by 30 all the money's gone, right? I mean, that doesn't help, and especially if there was a lot of money to begin with. Options for choosing the trustee, again, that kind of goes back to, I mean, there's banks, there's families, but if you use a charitable pooled trust organization, that trustee is going to be there, because it's not a person. You're not reliant on a person, you're reliant on an organization. Let's see. So again, we kind of talked about the safeguards. protecting funding for services needed by the individual with disabilities. We kind of covered that. And that's really long-term. And the mission of the program is definitely the well-being of the beneficiary. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we want, is for the beneficiary to be healthy, to live the best life possible, whatever that looks like. And, you know, to make sure they're taken care of for as long as the funds, you know, last. Oops. So this is just my little, we've kind of touched on all of these pieces. So a little bit about Plan of Arizona. We're a nonprofit. We've been around for 26 years. We're a member of the National Plan Alliance, and I'm on the board of directors for this. I'm the secretary on the National Plan Alliance. And it's such a great group. You guys write down the website. It's now you can just Google it. If you have family that has beneficiaries in other states, our goal on the NPA is to have a local Arizona-based pool trust organization in every state. We do not allow national pool trust companies to join the National Plan Alliance. It's really for state-specific or, you know, maybe two states that, you know, go together, like maybe Arizona and New Mexico. Back east, some of them do several states. But it's just a great resource if you need an organization like ours in a different state. We are a charitable corporate trustee. We do special needs trust management services. Again, we do the pooled trust, but along with the pooled trust, families can also name us as the successor trustee of individual trusts. So if you have Emily or another attorney draft a special needs trust for your loved one, or if it's an individual trust, maybe you're in a car accident, you could still name us as the trustee or the successor trustee. And we also do support trusts. So sometimes we have families where maybe there's an individual who has, you know, substance abuse history or is not a good money manager. They can name us as trustee of support trust, and we're actually doing more and more of that, where there's not the special needs part, so there's not the restrictions, but maybe they have a drug problem, and the parents are like, if we leave this money to Sam, it'll be gone in a month. So will you please administer it? And here's what we want it to look like. Here's how we want the money to be used. This is what the money cannot be used for. And we try to follow all those guidelines. And we serve all people. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so one of the questions, and I don't know whether you want to answer it or tell people how to get to your website where they can look these things up, but how is the cost of the trust determined in terms of setup fees and then ongoing maintenance? And again, if your fee schedule's on your website, that might be the best place to find it, but however you want to answer that.
Yeah, well, you can go to our website, but what I will say is that our fees are on a sliding scale. So our fees are going to start off higher, the more money is in there. But as the fees drop, the cost of our administration fee is going to drop. And that's one of the really important things. We're going to charge a little bit higher for someone who has $500,000 in there. But if someone has $5,000, I think the minimum is $45 a month right now. So that's kind of our way of doing things, is just to provide it on a sliding scale. And I'm happy, people want to email me. It's liz@planofaz.org. I'd be happy to answer any other questions about that or send any other information you need. And really, we do answer that question, who will care for my loved one when I'm gone? One of my favorite things is when I meet with families and they hug me after, well, pre-COVID, and they're like, I have peace of mind now. Like, I know, like, things are going to be okay now. So I always love that. So here's just some of the other services that we provide. Again, like future care planning that we talked about, advocacy, we do home visits and monitoring. We do care management and service coordination. Again, you know, the beneficiary needs to go to the doctor or do something like that, we do it. We are the representative payee for Social Security. So we only do it for our trust clients, but if our trust client also needs a rep payee, we serve in that capacity. We're also a federal fiduciary for the VA. We just started doing conservatorships. And then we're the trustee for special needs trust, individual and pooled and support trusts. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
So far, I don't see any questions that haven't been answered.
Okay.
I hope that people understand, just kind of as a wrap up, that one of the, there are all these different kinds of trusts, and in your mind, you have to sort of separate out money that's directly to the beneficiary versus money that you can plan for, and so we can get it into a third-party trust, pooled or otherwise. And so those are sort of the two ways you go, and we don't have a choice. We can't say, well, I want it to go to a third-party trust, but it was left outright by grandma to Joe, who's on SSI benefits. So doing some planning in advance when we can. Obviously, accidents and things like that we can't really plan for. But I think one of the experiences that I know a mutual client of ours has had is that as they've aged, they wanted the opportunity to sort of try out Plan of Arizona. And so they created the third-party special needs trust with them. They put in some money, but not everything, not a large sum of money, so that while they're alive, they have the opportunity for the beneficiary, who's competent but disabled, to communicate directly with the pooled trust now and see how those services go and how easy is it to make distributions and how frustrated or not frustrated is everybody on that, and kind of work out those kinks while mom and dad are still alive and can be there to help kind of smooth those things over. It's kind of the way I think of housing, that to keep your disabled beneficiary with you forever, and then you pass away and now they've lost you and they have to find a new place to live, is jarring. But if you can kind of create a bridge, I think that that's a really nice way to smooth things over and make things work for people. So that's an experience that, we have a client that's used Plan that I think has worked really well for them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions coming up. So we're only about 5 minutes to 1 anyway. Again, I'm Emily Kile. I'm an attorney in the Scottsdale office, and of course, in our Scottsdale office of my law firm, and then of course Liz Kosloff with Plan of Arizona. And we so appreciate all of you participating today and asking phenomenal questions, which I've been answering. So Liz doesn't know all those great questions you've been asking me along the way. And I just really appreciate it. I hope you're all safe and healthy out there. We all hope this goes away soon, but I think we're in it for the long haul. So we've gotten better at technology from my first few presentations. So again, thank you to all of you. Visit our websites, see what information you might need, and we look forward to giving you a big hug when we can. So thank you all so much, and have a terrific afternoon.
Thank you.